welcome to Logan Rando Aquascaping. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Logan Rando, and this is the very first video on my brand new YouTube channel, Logan Rando Aquascaping. So I really appreciate you being here. Today we're gonna talk about this tank right here, which I just set up 1 week ago. I just moved across the entire United States. I drove a U-Haul and towed my Honda on the back from upstate New York, Albany, and now I'm in Portland, Oregon. So I got all settled in and I could not wait to set up my first aquascape because you know how it is. If you're into this hobby, it doesn't really feel like a home until you've got some stuff set up. So this bad boy is about 7 days old, and I want to talk to you a little bit about my philosophy behind the layout of it, the planting, as well as what we're going to do moving forward. But before we move on, I realized I totally forgot to tell you guys about the inspiration behind this layout. So in order to do that, we're going to have to take a little walk through the forest. So why don't you come with me? So here we are in the beautiful Washington Park located in Portland, Oregon. And as you can see, we're surrounded by these really, really beautiful looking redwood trees. They have these gorgeous red orangey hues that I've never seen anything like it on the East Coast. So when I came out here for the first time, I saw the colors and I was just inspired. But the thing that really caught my eye is this drop dead gorgeous moss that you see just wrapped all around these branches. And it's very dry and it just kind of hangs down freely. So I kind of tried to somewhat recreate that with the Physcidins fontanus because it has a lot of texture and it's sort of a darker green. So even though it's a bit different, I think once it's grown in, it's gonna look super cool. All right, so let's talk about the hardscape first. So at the base, we've got the ADA aqua soil, which in my opinion is really some of the best aqua soil money can buy. So this is the Amazonia version 2, which is super nutrient rich. It comes with the nutrient tablets that you bury into the soil. And under that, I've got 3 ADA additives. I've got the Bacter 100, I've got the Clear Super, and I've got the Tourmaline BC. So all of that stuff should combine to create really what are favorable conditions for bacteria, the good bacteria to establish. And that's really what balances your tank. It's everything with aquascaping is bacteria versus algae. So for hardscape materials, I've got Surrey stone. And really, you know, this is the first time that I haven't gone too crazy with stone. A lot of times in my previous scapes, I've been absolutely obsessed with the details because if you look at, you know, some of the stuff that the pros are doing, the professional aquascapers and the IAPLC winning works, it's all in the details, man. These guys and gals get so crazy with the details. And that's my favorite part, but I think one of the mistakes I'd made in the past is in my layouts, I was finding I was putting tons of little details in spots that would just get covered up with either carpeting plants or rosette plants. So I was really conservative this time because I thought about the plants for once. And I think it paid off because it left me a ton of space for adding epiphytes. And we'll get into that in a second. So we've got the Surrey stone and all of the striation sort of takes your eye from this back corner to the front right corner. So I learned from the Josh Sim video on the Green Aqua channel, which if you haven't seen it yet, man, game-changing content. Go check that out. I learned that, you know, you really want to take the viewer's eye on some sort of a journey. So, you know, I'm only an intermediate aquascaper myself. It's really just now that I'm starting to feel somewhat confident about my layout. So I wanted to take your eye on a journey, and that journey starts at the very back of the tank, the back left corner, and it goes to the very right of the tank where we have this negative space. So the Surrey stone, the way they're directioned, and the striation should hopefully reinforce that. And then we've got this bad boy, the Pacific wood, which I picked up at my local fish store back in the capital region of upstate New York, a place called BFR. Shout out to BFR. And I picked this up for $100. It was one of those trips to the store where you're like, oh yeah, you know, maybe I'll just pick up a cup of tissue culture plant, or, you know, maybe a couple algae eaters or something like that. Of course, I saw the wood and I was like, all right, I'm dropping $100 right now. But it paid off. I felt guilty at the time, and I'm really happy that I picked it up because I think it's just a stunning piece. So what I did was I took the wood, I sawed off a lot of the branches on it so that I could sort of customize the way it goes into the tank. And I laid that out in here, and again, it's meant to take your eye from the back left to the front right. And I think I've achieved that. You know, it's got some tension with these branches coming up. And I still have a ton of little branches and little details that I can add in, but I'm holding off until I get through the algae phase of this tank, which we should be encountering in a few days, because I don't want to be scrubbing algae off really tiny branches. So that's a little bit of a tip for you guys. Maybe hold off on popping those fine details until you've really balanced the tank, because it's just going to make your maintenance process a lot more difficult. So be patient, and you know, it's kind of cool a couple weeks later to add more hardscape, or even take stuff away. You know, that's another tip from Josh Sim, is don't be afraid to take stuff away. So we'll see. Anywho, that's it for the hardscape. So let's talk about the planting. So in the foreground over here, and all these plants here are from Boost Plant, which I am so thankful to have in the United States. For quite a few years, I started this hobby 5 years ago, and man, I could not find anything locally that fit my needs. So if you're in the States, I cannot recommend Boost Plants enough. They've got a ton of tissue culture plants, and they have got a ton of already submerged plants, which are very good quality as well. So in the foreground, I'm using 4 cups of the Helanthrium tenellum green, which is a very, very beautiful, bright to mid-green colored grassy plant. And I absolutely love it. The last scape I used had a big jungle of it. It's very easy to maintain. It grows very fast, roots really well, and I just find that it's a super easy plant to keep, and it's sort of instant impact. So that sort of takes us from the foreground, and then when we get to the midground, they're a little bit tricky to see right now because they're small. They were also from tissue culture. I've got some Cryptocorini green gecko, which I'd never heard of. I don't think I've seen anybody use it. But I looked up the pictures of what it grows into, and it's really beautiful. It's got a really interesting kind of texture to it. So I've got that in there. And then in a couple highlight points, I have what is called Echinodorus aflame, which again, never heard of that, never used it before. But here's an image of what it looks like grown in, and man, I just find that color to be so unique. Sometimes I think with some of the Alternantheras and the Ludwigia palustra super red, sometimes that really bright, saturated red could look a little bit artificial to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's got its place, but I wanted a little bit more of a deep tone with this. So I think this is gonna be really interesting because it's almost like a purpley red. So let me know if you've ever kept that before. I'm curious to see what you guys think of it and what your experience is with it, because I'm brand new to it, but I'm really excited. It's already grown a few centimeters. That takes us to some more of the midground where we have a ton of epiphytes. So I have built up this epiphyte collection over I'd say the past 3 years. I took all 3 of my tanks down when I left Albany. And thanks to the advice of my good friend and colleague Yuri's, he taught me that you can put your epiphytes in like a little Tupperware container of soil and just cover it with saran wrap or like a lid or something, and just keep it moist, and they'll stay really healthy. And I probably had them like that for 3 weeks, 5 days driving across the country, in and out of hotel rooms. And they probably look better than when they were even in the tank. So that technique worked out really well. And really, for the first time ever, I had just a ton of epiphytes to work with. So I glued them all over the place and kind of wrapped the tree around with them. So I'm really pleased with how that turned out. And then to contrast the sort of brighter greens of the Anubias, I've got these bluish purple hues, dark green hues of the Bucephalandra. So I think when those kind of fill in and grow out a little bit more, it's gonna look really dope. And then that takes us to the background where I have probably about 6 microsorghum plants that I was able to cut up and divide into, I think, about 10. And it looks super sparse right now, but the microsorghum should fill in, I don't know, like a month or so. And really, I want it to just look really, really lush and full back there. So I'm looking forward to that. And the cool thing about these guys is, like Boost and Anubias, they're epiphytes. So you glued the rhizome to a piece of rock, and you can just kind of put that rock anywhere you want and then bury it into the soil. And if you ever decide you're unhappy with the placement of it, you could always move it. So make sure you don't bury the rhizome on that though. They really need that good circulation and oxygen to stay nice and healthy. So that's the planting of this tank. I wanna make a separate video about all the tech I'm using, because this thing is pretty geared out. 5 years into aquascaping, I've finally built up a pretty nice collection of tech where I'm able to really gear out my tanks. And that's kind of a fun side of the hobby. It's not all necessary, but you know, I'm a gearhead, I'm a filmmaker, videographer by trade, so I just geek out on this stuff. So I've got a lot going on in here, but I will talk to you guys about the filtration, because for me, it's a really important part about setting up a scape and you know, minimizing algae and maximizing the chances for success for your plants. So I'm really over filtering the tank. And in my experience, there's really no such thing as over filtering unless, I don't know, your fish are being blown around and your plants are being uprooted. Obviously that's not the case here, but what it does is you get a very fast turnover rate of the volume, and you get this amazing surface agitation, which for me was a game changer. So not only do I have the surface skimmer, but I've got a ton of surface agitation, which creates a really high amount of gas exchange, which really minimizes surface scum and increases oxygen in the tank. So yeah, there's a ton of surface movement, which is really good for your tank. And I'm filtering it with the Owaza Biomaster 600. And this is on a UNS 60U, which is about 19 gallons and change. So a lot of people would say, man, that's huge, but again, you can't really over filter a tank in my experience. So yeah, this thing is definitely set up for success. I will make more videos on the tech and more of the specifics of this tank, but I also want to walk you guys through the process of balancing this tank out. So we're only 7 days in, starting to get the first signs of bacteria on the wood, and about 10 days in, we should be getting those first signs of algae. So I'm doing the daily ADA water changes, and then week 2 will be every other day, and then week 3 is every 3rd day, and so on until you get down to 1 a week. So I want to walk you guys through the process of how this develops, adding the algae eaters, adding the fish, and I've got a lot of other cool content coming out. So I know there's a million aquascaping channels and aquarium related channels out there, so I want to do something unique, and I want to inject my own personality and my filmmaking background, as well as my sense of humor into this stuff, because you know, in this aquascaping community, it's so niche, and you know, we all geek out on this stuff and get nerdy about rocks and wood and plants and stuff like that. And I think there's some room for comedy within that, because you know, this stuff is nerdy. And you know, one example of an idea I have is doing a little skit showing what it's like when you're on a date and you tell a girl you aquascape and all the questions you get and the confusion. So I've got some funny situations that I'd like to put onto video and film, and you know, kind of inject that into the channel. So thank you so much for watching today, guys. It really means everything to me. I'm so happy to be here, finally creating some content of my own. And if you want to see more of what I'm going to do, I'm going to fill this apartment up with houseplants, aquariums, terrariums. Hit subscribe, stay tuned, and make sure you create something for yourself today. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.